So this is okay. So I want to share with you a video with just some information in general about disinformation. And I am speaking to you from my experience as a US citizen and what I have seen, especially when Biden was elected and what happened after the election on January 6th. So, I can only speak to you about my experiences, but I think that as a US citizen, that there are many things we have in common in working with democracy and making sure there's peace and stability and the furtherance, the continuation of democracy and the safeguards. So I like this. It's a very small, short documentary. It was actually made by Canadians. So I find it to be very neutral in its approach. So I want to share this with you. And I recommend if you just, as you're listening, take some notes if you have any thoughts.
So I don't believe I'm in on president. I am here because I support Trump.
I know the election stuff. The numbers just don't add up.
Donald Trump's lie that the 2020 election was rigged could undermine American democracy.
Ladies, if you're gonna be called deplorable, you should be adorable. If that will make it for you.
The false claim unites his hardcore supporters of this rally in southern Texas, who see it as their patriotic duty to defend.
January the 6th, 2021 was the greatest day of my whole life. And it was the greatest day of my whole life because I felt like one of the original patriots standing beside our founding fathers, speaking up against King George.
I think this should be a national holiday, maybe a worldwide holiday that America stood up and said, no, you're still in the election.
The Capitol attack did not serve as a wake-up call here. Some argue they're on the right side of history, even though in reality, it's all based on a lie. So what happens to democracy when a group too large to be considered fringe feels wronged at a time when attitudes toward conflict shift?
If in this moment people who think that the government has been illegitimate before, it does have to advocate for believing that violent protest is legitimate.
Some is part of a team of researchers that surveys Americans about political violence. They found roughly 1 in 4 Americans say political violence can be justified, while 1 in 10 say it's justified right now. What can you tell me you know about the people that answered yes, violence is justified?
They're disproportionately on the right. They're also disproportionately young men.
People don't trust the results of elections. Can we expect there to be political violence?
It does conditions for violent protest. Definitely that misinformation, I think, helps create the conditions where violence could occur.
The committee is investigating what led to the Capitol attack and broader efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The threat of political violence has not subsided as concerning trends emerge. When I think about January 6th, or when I think about the start of civil wars in general, it requires 2 types of people. It requires leaders or elites who are organizing these movements, and average citizens to support those individuals in their pursuit of power through violent means. Barbara Walter has studied this issue for 30 years. For the start, he says, and begin with once they don't sense they are losing the Republican Party and, very carefully crafted this big lie, the elections. The people on January 6th, they believed that they were doing right things, that they were being true patriots. The leaders of the Republican Party, however, they know better. And they're the ones who are pushing this lie, and they're pushing it for very self-interested reasons. Because Trump still has enthusiastic support on full display at rallies like this one in Texas, there are zero expectations he will change his tactics. He's now offering protection to those who broke the law in his name.
If I run, we treat those people from January 6th, we will treat them fairly. Parties, we will give them parties because they are treated so unfairly.
While Trump's law was not overturned the 2020 result, his influence on U.S. democracy will be tested this week when voters in November's midterm election. Whether these people actually accept the results is anyone's guess. That the world is watching anxiously to see whether Americans still have faith in free and fair elections says a lot just how much democracy is at risk. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Conroe, Texas.
So I think that, you know, the United States compared to many countries has a reputation for having a pretty stable democracy. So I'm no expert on democracy, but I do know that misinformation and particularly disinformation fueled this event. And it was lies and misinformation and disinformation. And when I think about that type of disinformation, what it did to the US democracy, I can only imagine what disinformation does to more fragile democracies, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm going to continue, but I wanted to see if you have any comments or questions. Even in French, and I can respond in Franglais if you'd like. Yes. That's a great question. Like, is there one trustworthy? Is there one media that we trust? New York Times, Le Monde, Telegraph, USA Today, Doha News. Yeah, many, Reuters, Associated Press. That's a good question. I don't trust the New York Times. But if I see that a journalist from the New York Times has reported, and a journalist from the Los Angeles Times has reported, and the Chicago Tribune, Le Monde, Telegraph in the United Kingdom, if they're all reporting the same, all of these different journalists are investigating and reporting very similar or the same news, I always verify. That's an excellent question. And that's something I tell my students at ESDC. What you should always think critically about the news. So imagine if you are thinking critically about the New York Times, imagine that's where I get my news. New York Times, Chicago Tribune, many large outlets, Reuters, Associated Press, RFI, right? But where do most people get their news? Where do they go? Number one place where people get their news. Do you know? Namely where? Exactly. Facebook. So much disinformation and misinformation is transmitted through Facebook and other social media sites, but Facebook has been the number one offender. And that's where I don't know if you noticed in the video that those disinformation campaigns that use Facebook, they're targeting in the US young men. Almost all of them are white, and almost all of them have never been to college or they did not finish college. And most of them are from the South. So it's not only the fault of media, it's also the fault of problems, issues we have in the US and how we equity, access, we have discrimination and racism. We have very serious problems that contribute to those issues of disinformation. But that's an excellent question that he's asked, to point out that we really must question, where did this news come from? And I think, as I said before, you as professionals, you question everything. But younger people, I would say, who have not maybe had some life experiences or who've not had some professional experiences or political experiences, they're not asking those questions. If they see it on Instagram, it must be true, right? And that's, I think, is dangerous. And that's what, and many experts say, contributed to the threat to the US democracy in the last election. That and many other things as well. So that's a great question. Anyone else? Yes.
How to utilize the education, because as we saw here, the city has actually got the difference. You know that the US have a strong development. What about compared to this? How we how can we utilize?
That's a great question. Also, do you know that in the US, all along the South, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, all Texas, many of the states in the South have Republican leadership. And the US actually has a national system. It's called ERIC, E-R-I-C. It's a system that verifies voting in the US. So, for example, I live in Texas, but if I vote in Texas in the presidential election in Texas, then I move to New Mexico and I try to vote again, that system, ERIC, that prohibits me from voting. It verifies my identity. So the US has a system for that nationwide verification. However, many Republican administrations in the South, they refuse now to use the ERIC system. So they continue to compromise our system. And I say Republican, I'm not going to tell you what party I belong to, but the problem with that is they are engineering their districts to disenfranchise Black voters in the US. And when they continue those efforts of disenfranchising, like prohibiting the ERIC system in their state, and then also organizing districts that are mostly white, they're engineering the vote to disenfranchise poor voters, Black voters, voters of color. So it's still, like I say to people, the US democracy is a model, but it is not perfect. And it always makes me think of how fragile it is. Imagine in places like Mali, Cote d'Ivoire, Chad, where we have already seen the results of that. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, good question. Okay, So I want to share this information with you. Do you know the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation? Do you know the difference? It's
Misinformation, disinformation, and violence. Can I just, so
Yeah.
okay. For my knowledge, malinformation is to use some information. Is the way of giving out the information to some people, to the audience. Is the way of doing that. This information is to hide the truth, or maybe to hijack some information to people. And misinformation is not to give at all any information.
good. That's a good explanation. Anyone else want to try? Thank you for that. So I'll show you the differences. Misinformation is false information that spreads even though you did not intend to. If I come here today and I say, hey, Vakaba told me that President Biden is going to visit Abidjan next week. And then he tells him and him and him and her, and it spreads. But then I realized, oh, not President Biden, the US ambassador. It was my mistake. But I have already misinformed someone and then it spread. So I didn't do it to be with poor intentions. I just said it because I thought it was true, but I didn't verify. So sometimes misinformation we spread on purpose in a way that makes it harmful, but it might be true to some extent, but it's the way we share. And then disinformation is purposeful, like you intend to share the information to do harm. And this one is the most harmful to peace and stability and the maintenance of a strong and healthy democracy. And then malinformation, it's based on, but taken out of context, and it's meant to harm or to mislead. So parts of it may be true, but you are spreading it in a way to do harm. And then misinformation is spreading information, but not intentionally. And then, of course, disinformation is intentional. And they are all very, very dangerous for peace, stability, and a healthy democracy, particularly in the most fragile places in the world. But like my own experience, it's the West. It can be very harmful. And that's my franglais at the bottom. So you may notice some problems. Excuse me. Okay. So we have some ideas now about misinformation, disinformation, malinformation. I want to share this video because the next question is, so we know what it is. What do we do about it? How do we combat? How do we fight against these things that are dangerous, like I said, for peace, stability, and a healthy democracy?
Digital tools, it's easier than ever. Publish your work to the web, but there's a consequence. It's also easier than ever to spread misinformation, and fake news has become a real issue in recent times. We see this with students. According to a study, only 25% of high school students were able to identify an accurate news story compared to a fake one.
So I think that's an interesting statistic that when they did this research at Stanford University, only 50% of the students could identify fake news. So that means 75% of those young people are believing what they read or see or hear. My guess is that's true in many places in the world. And for it to be among university students who are supposed to be intellectuals and critical thinkers, that's something of concern.
Students often have to distinguish between real and fake photographs as well as fake video. Researchers use the words belief and mainly to describe this, but it's not going away anytime soon. That's a very real problem. So how do we fix it? Well, here's a 5-step process that I use with students. A word of caution, it's not perfect, and there are probably other models out there, but I thought I would share it just in case you might want to use it. We call it the 5 C's of critical consuming. Number 1, context. Look at the context of the article. When was it written? When?
So this is the first C, context of where and when and how it's reported.
Did it come from? The events changed since then. Is there any new information that could change your perspective? Number 2, credibility.
And this goes back to the question of credibility. Where did it come from? If it's in the New York Times, okay, maybe it's more likely to be true, but can you compare it to other places? Is it in the Associated Press? Is it in Universal Press International, Reuters? Where did it show up? And is it in international places as well?
Check the credibility of a source. Does the site have a reputation for journalistic integrity? Does the author cite credible sources? Is it satirical? Is it on the list of fake news sites? Is it actually an advertisement posing as a real news story? Number 3, construction. What is the construction of the article? What is the bias? Are there any loaded words, any omissions, any propaganda techniques? Can you distinguish between the facts and the opinions? Or is it merely a bunch of speculation? Number 4, corroborate. Corroborate the information.
And this goes back to corroboration. If it's in the middle, is it also in the New York Times? Is it in the Telegraph? And do all of those intersect and corroborate the information? So that's also very important.
And with other credible news sources, research is not the only source that you best claim. There's a good chance it's not true. Number 5, compare. Compare to other news sources to get a different perspective. Find other credible sources from other areas of the intellectual or political spectrum to provide nuance and get a bigger picture of what's on.
and they learn how to think critically. They learn how to be critical. And critical thinking citizens are good for democracy. Well,
So, and I'll share this again as well, the 5 Cs, but all of this is something that you have all mentioned is that information needs to be investigated and need to encourage voters, citizens to think critically about information because there is a lot of misinformation and information, especially during election cycles, during campaigning, about candidates, about parties, about ideas. So I'm giving you a lot of background information because we're going to be doing a discussion activity that you'll use this information and the article that you read in our discussion. So this is also kind of the same thing, how to stop fake news. One, consider the source. Where did it come from? And check the author. I notice a lot of misinformation and disinformation does not have an author. And if it is, it's someone that maybe was not trained as a journalist, does not have a deep academic background in journalism or media, oftentimes, and often it's just simply an opinion. Also check the date. You know, we saw the story earlier of the Qatar emir who said that gas would be cut off from Gaza. You know, if anyone was truly investigating, they would notice the date was from 2017. Check your biases. As a reader, as a thinker, we all have biases. We maybe lean one way or the other, and that's something to think about when we read or view or listen to information, whether it's the news or any information. Read beyond. This is something that's interesting to me. I don't know if you use, it used to be Twitter, now it's X. So before, when you read on Twitter, it would give you the headline, the title of the story. But now X has taken the title away. And there's a lot of controversy about it, but I think maybe it's a good idea to take the title away because it forces people to read into the story. So, but many people are upset that they've taken the title out of the posting. But that's something I tell my students at ESDC as future media professionals to always read deeply or to listen deeply or to view deeply, depending on the media that you're looking at or the information, Facebook, social media. And then, is it a joke? Is this for real? And then ask the experts. And it's easy now to investigate, to research with internet access. So this is one set of ideas. And of course, it all involves thinking critically about information that we receive. So this is some interesting information, misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation in Cote d'Ivoire. I'm not an expert, but this is from a resource that I use in my courses at ESDC. And I'll share the resource with you also. This is a really good investigation, this article. How many? Yeah. One another.
1-0.
Okay. So, and, all, yeah, young people, yeah. But when you think about, I just did a media presentation at IUGB in Grand Bassam, and it was interesting to me that Côte d'Ivoire in the region has the highest use of cell phones and internet, more than Senegal, more than the entire region, like proportionately per capita. So there is, because there's been a lot of investment and here, so there is a very high level of use. So this is interesting when you compare it. And this is from a publication from the Atlantic Council, which I regard as a very credible group. They work on a lot of peace building, conflict resolution. It's the disinformation landscape in West Africa and beyond. And you can see there are almost 10 million users of the internet. And by penetration rate, it means that it's probably 36%. And then social media users, about 23%. And some of the numbers I'm not so sure about. But you can see in Nigeria, it's phenomenally greater, of course, and reasons for that. But a lot of people use the internet and have access to social media. And then, of course, there are just tremendous mobile connections. Like almost everyone has a cell phone, right? And can purchase some level of data from time to time or regularly to have access to media, right? So with that in mind, and I will share this publication. It's got the article or the entire thing is very interesting. So this is also from last year. This is for the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. It's also a nonprofit. It's a group that I trust. Their research, true academics. Guess who is running the most disinformation campaigns in Africa? Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's mostly Russia. And this is based on some good research, in my opinion, that can as well. So you can see even in Côte d'Ivoire, there have been verified disinformation campaigns that allegedly are perpetrated by Russians and likely the government. Yes. Okay, yeah, I don't know. Let me see if it will be clear, even if I enlarge it. Let me see if I can. A little bit better. So you can see in the blue areas, there's an active disinformation campaign going on in particularly East Africa. And then the gold, there are active campaigns going on. And then, of course, there are multiple things going on in the dark red in these areas. And you'll notice the commonalities, what they have in common. If you know, like, for example, in Angola, Zimbabwe, Madagascar. There's a lot of Russian interest in oil and gas and mining. A lot of research in that. So there's always purpose behind external disinformation campaigns to destabilize, to draw attention away. And I will share this also. I will share the okay. So I don't know if you can see this very well, but this is it was from a video, and supposedly this was true, and many people believed this, and it circulated on Facebook, particularly in Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, and much of West Africa. This is part of a video from the Wagner Group. You know, the Wagner Group is a Russian mercenary group showing a supposed Wagner mercenary escaping from his jihadist captors in Mali. This was widely circulated. The video was amplified by 23 pro-Russian Facebook accounts, resulting in a total of 74,229 social interactions and 1.8 million views as of June 2022. A research review confirmed that they consistently share pro-Russia content targeting Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Cameroon. The post was traced to a previously identified pro-Russia media channel called Afrique Media. And, you know, if you look at the name Afrique Media, it sounds, but it's not. It was a verified Russian created media. So imagine the harm that this can do in the region. Here's another one. This was interesting. This is a screenshot of a social media post on Facebook in 2022. It alleged that there was a meeting between the president or former president Gbagbo and the Russian President Putin. Allegedly, it turned out to be misinformation. It was fake. And again, it was pro-Russian Facebook accounts run from Cote d'Ivoire that have amplified false narratives that suggest former Ivorian president has ties to Moscow and enjoys the support of the Russian president. It's a 2022 post from Facebook called Parti des Peuples Africains Côte d'Ivoire, false account. Said there was a meeting. Why would someone do that? Why would this be created? What possible objective would they have? Would this destabilize? This type of false information, could it destabilize? Could it impact an election? Yeah. Could it impact perceptions? Yes. Right? So, but this was shared multiple times, millions of times. So it has the potential to be very harmful. And then this is a fake Facebook account of the Russian president. Disinformation actors use paid Facebook advertisements to target audiences in Cote d'Ivoire with pro-Russia messaging. The paid campaigns intend to spread false information, recruit followers. The Putin Facebook was created in 2022 and promoted itself as Putin's official Facebook page. The advertisement was run without a disclaimer in violation of platform rules. It's similar with Malian accounts. such as Zoom Money and Time Now magazine, which promote pro-Russian ads without a disclaimer. So these media companies like Meta, who owns Facebook, Instagram, there are others like Snapchat, WhatsApp promotes a lot of disinformation. They go unmonitored until someone alerts them to remove it. So again, my question to you is, could this be a problem for elections, politics, stability? It could pose serious issues if this disinformation is spread. This ad was shown mostly in Abidjan. And this is not very clear, but the majority of this advertising targeted this region of Abidjan, Grand Bassam, all along the coastal area where the population is most dense and most educated, and some of the youngest people live in this region because they've come here seeking employment or education. So it's very purposeful. This is a Facebook user. You may be familiar with this. I think that he's, since this is an old report, but been brought to justice. This is an example of an online influencer who's been accused of promoting false narratives, a lot of disinformation. But what's interesting about this is that I believe there was a legal pursuit of him. And this is happening more in the United States as well. And then this is from a Facebook post amplifying the alleged telephone conversation between the Ivorian president and the former Malian prime minister. This circulated in the news widely, like millions of users, many of whom believed this, but it was verified fake, false. It was a manipulated video using artificial intelligence, and it was first discovered on WhatsApp, and it falsely reported a telephone conversation between the Ivorian president and the Malian prime minister. In the segment, the pair discuss a plot to overthrow the Malian military junta with support from France and rebel groups. The video, which uses an artificial intelligence to create the voices and photos, claims that both leaders do not support Russian involvement in Mali, and the audio was shared by several pro-Russia Facebook posts. Completely false. But imagine the harm that this can do to a region, because not only was this a fake interaction, but it impacts alliances with the region, with other countries, with the security interest. So now to the article. And this is where we'll start our discussion. I want to give you a couple of questions to think about. One, how can social media be used to promote peace and reduce conflict? There's some examples in the article. And then how can social media be used as a peace-building instrument? And how can social media promote social mobilization and democracy? And explain the different policy responses to social media disinformation campaigns and give examples. There have been punitive, there have been voluntary codes of conduct, and there has been resilience building, like counter messaging, to discover the disinformation and then build messaging and communication to correct it and to, okay? So I want to minutes questions and you think orients your thinking? Maybe 5 minutes to think, and then we'll discuss. And you'll tell me if I'm going too fast. Okay. I know you are still thinking a bit, but I want to have a brief discussion about the article because my objective is to use the information that we looked at in general about misinformation, disinformation, and some of the items in the text, because the thing I'd like to do is to have a discussion about the implications for Cote d'Ivoire, which is where you work and you live. So I want to go ahead and begin, and we can just speak and discuss organically as you would like. But I would like to begin with any of these. Would someone like to start with one of these items, 1, 2, 3, or 4? Yeah. Good question. His question is, does democracy actually exist? Was that your question? Does it really exist? Anybody want to answer?
Because my question, because I remarked that when I have saw your production, I remarked that each country is social réseau. So if finance is not good to make a job,
Yes.
you show us Russia, but we have America, we have France treaty. Each country is a social network. I remember.
Yes.
I want to know, democracy, is it real?
Excellent question. Anybody want to answer, or that's a great question. I want to show you something. Daniel, can I use the whiteboard? I know, but I changed. He has a good question. I want to show you something. Is democracy real? Does it exist? I want to show you something. So I live in Texas. I'm not from Texas, but I live there. My children go to the university there. They were born there. And Texas's population, I think, is millions. Like, I think it might be, I don't know, I'm guessing maybe 10 million. I don't know, maybe, does anybody know? So Texas has a population. So Texas has a population of, I don't know, maybe 10 million, let's say 10 million. I just looked at, I think it's North Dakota. This is a state, North Dakota. It's in the north, in the middle of the US, north. So Texas has 10 million people. I think it's North Dakota. Less than 1 million. North Dakota has fewer than 1 million people in the state. Texas has 10 million, maybe more. Do you know how many US senators represent Texas? 2. 2 senators. It's in the Constitution. How many senators represent North Dakota? 2. Equal. But the population here, the needs, the economy, the politics, but we have the same number of senatorial representatives as North Dakota. We have more, this is 2 in the Senate, and they have 2 in the Senate because the Constitution declares that. It's in the Constitution. But in the House of Representatives, they have fewer representatives because it's based on their population. And we have more representatives because our population is greater. But most of our representatives are white. But the population of Texas, more than 50%, almost 60% are Black and brown people from their immigrants, or they're born in Texas or the United States, but they're Black or brown. But 50% or more live in Texas, but both senators are white and men, and the majority of the representatives are white and mostly men. So I have the same question because we have a representative democracy. It's not one vote, one person, one vote. It's you vote and then the Electoral College decides. So that's a very good question. In my opinion, this is a very flawed system. I think it's problematic. Very much. Anybody else? Yeah. So I think that it's a representative, but I don't think it represents the majority, because I'll show you in Texas, for example. I think it looks something like this, right? So here is Houston. Houston has about the same population as Abidjan, but the majority of Houston is Black or brown people, not white. But most of their representatives are white. Because when the Texas Congress decides the voting districts, they divide the district so that it pushes aside Black neighborhoods or brown neighborhoods. And my question is, how is that a democracy? And the same, I live here in the capital, in Austin. My representative, you think he would be representing here, but the Republican administration has divided the district. My voting district is thousands of miles all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. This is my representative represents an area all the way to the beach, to that area. So this is how we district in the US determine who your representative will be. you may know this term gerrymandering. Yeah, it's gerrymandering. And I think that it creates a very problematic democracy. That's a great question. Anyone else? I think I'm talking too much. Does someone else have a question or comment? Yes.
Thank you very much. Finally, we noticed that if there is no real democracy, those who pretend to give lesson to, other countries, they do it because they are powerful. Because even in their own country, we can see that democracy is not a unfortunately. You can't give lesson to someone if you do it in your own country. So, because I'm strong, because I have power, I can decide for others. And
that's an excellent point, a very excellent point, because, but I have to say, this is not a perfect system, but it is a system that has potential to be great. And the great thing is, in the US, we have the three branches, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. What's happening now is there is judicial, or there's advocacy to change the gerrymandering, that they're going to court and they're taking it to the justices to represent people who have not been represented. And this system of gerrymandering, the reason we have the Electoral College was to disenfranchise Black voters before the Civil Rights Act. And it still exists. This system is still existing, but I have to say in the US that they're getting better. It's not perfect. And I think the great balance is that our justice is a place where people can bring their grievances and have results. And we're beginning to see results. For example, in Alabama recently, they attempted to gerrymander and disenfranchise Black voters, and it went to court, and those voters won. So now it's going to keep that equal, equitable representation. So there is reclamation, there is the justice side, but I also, like you said, like, who am I to tell anyone what democracy looks like? Because we have a representative democracy, but it's not perfect. It is truly a work in progress. And, we're a young country. The US is not as old as many other countries in the world, but you are absolutely right. And on the international level, sometimes I think that when there are struggling democracies, that the US can sometimes come across as maybe pushing too hard when they have their own work to do. Completely agree with you. That's an excellent point. Anyone else? I agree. I'm worried because you probably have children. Do you have children? I do. They're one has just finished university, and then I have two who are still in university. I'm worried. Oh, I agree with you. Promote peace and reduce conflict. What are your ideas?
Is social, Russia has is network. Is network. France has network, but they cannot take sanction. It's very difficult. Every state to work, but work. They work to the interest. Yes. Sahel, Mali, we have the Russia, Russia, France, Russia, United States, this.
Yes.
I said we are just fighting for our own interests, just our own interests. So, what would say we are coming to give democracy? I mean, is not exact. I think is not exact.
I notice that it's very difficult to make democracy because in a big country which is developing, the democracy is different by the democracy to Africa. So a big country manipulates the result when we want to have a fair president. So it's very difficult. In Africa, it's very difficult. We have our democracy. Before democracy coming, in Africa, there was the test, the rule in Africa. So if you want to make democracy in Africa, it's important to take our behavior, the culture, and many things. And the person who destroys democracy is a big country. Yes.
Can you hear me? I don't know if social media can reduce conflicts by thinking they bring something to the table. Like someone like elevator or Martin Luther King. They could not just wake up one morning and sit at their breakfast table and talk to people. But today we can't. So somehow social media help us. But the problem in Africa, like you talk about Texas, it's not the same. Oh, sorry. I do agree that in America, I think it's different. Africa is it's difficult to live in Africa because you don't even know our rights. We are talking about democracy. What is democracy for us? So we should start by owning our democracy for knowing if social media can reduce it. But I don't think it will be nowadays.
To reduce, to promote the peace and reduce conflict, the social media must be impartial. Impartial. They must track information in an impartial manner, I think.
Yeah. Well, people go on social media based on their like-minded people. Like if I like Selena Gomez, I will go on internet and be friends with the people who like. So it's difficult to be in contact on social media.
So if you want to reduce from this, the citizen must improve the resistance to fake news and fake news. The technological business must to change the using of media social to avoid fake news. And the policy maker can stop the fake news. Thank you.
Okay, my own concern is that what is democracy, and is it possible to satisfy everyone? Because I don't think that democracy is made for everyone. Because as we know that in diplomacy, don't say things as usual for every maybe a region or area. And I've been told that 1+1 can be 2. One case in Alabama cannot be the same maybe in Guatemala or somewhere else. So the main thing we need to know what is democracy, and are we looking for that democracy? This is the main important thing for me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. My concern is that what we have just demonstrated on the board, talking about the unbalanced thing that happened in where you live, I'm very shocked and surprised, simply because you said, in my mind, America is free, okay, that it's united. But how comes that a country can have some specificities that can happen in somewhere, something can be good, and in the other one, there's a problem. We are Africans. Our continent is swimming on a word that's called democracy. It means what? In our cultures, we have our way of thinking. But to lead a country, we need to be truth first. Okay? If I don't trust you, I can give you my vote. It's what I do that you have to give me back. But unfortunately, I say unfortunately, we can't move with you because you said right now that America is not so old, that you are united, and then you are the one that you move everywhere in the world, say that we come to help the others. It will be difficult for us because social media is a tool for, big countries or strong countries to, I can say, control the others. It will be so difficult for us. Thank you.
So those are excellent points, and I agree with many of them. I think that social media is used, that there is media manipulation by many entities, by countries, by individuals. Every time there is manipulation, someone pointed this out earlier, there's an interest inside. And almost, in my opinion, in my research and my work, almost 100% of the time, it is economic. Somebody is going to profit off of that misinformation, whether it's a country, whether it's an individual, or there's an enterprise. And I think that, and I don't want to misrepresent the US. I'm very proud to be an American, and I'm very proud of the country, but I also am a realist. I know that it's not perfect. And as you said, like, that no country should come preaching, especially to Africa, as this is the only solution. I believe that the democracy that exists in the United States has many flaws, but it has so much potential, and it could go in the right direction. the problems that we have are because oftentimes there are people who react when they feel like they're not being heard. And there are, I would say, my guess is that a democracy, a true democracy, is possible when you are meeting the needs of everyone. The advantage in the United States is when you think about our unemployment rate, right? We have proportionately more people employed who are middle income, able to buy a house, buy a car, send their children to school. That creates stability. That's a certain level of economic stability that is promoting a good environment for a healthy democracy. It does have problems. There are equity issues, there are access issues, but my question back to you is, what do you think is the maybe number one thing that is impeding the type of democracy that would benefit, particularly Côte d'Ivoire? What would you say is something that impedes the growth of a healthy democracy, particularly in Côte d'Ivoire? To empêcher. Donc, je veux dire, est-ce qu'il y a une grande chose, quelque chose en particulier qui empêche la croissance de la démocratie en Côte d'Ivoire?
I don't have many things to say about the question, but what I know is that in Côte d'Ivoire, it's not easy sometimes to speak, to say what you think. This is very important because, democracy is based on what? On common sharings, on common, I would say, yes. So when you don't have the ability to say what you think, is very difficult. Yeah, the freedom of expression is very limited here. We have something in our mind, but we can express them in public, except when you are in your family. So this one is a very great hindrance to democracy in our country.
Yes, I said, if you tell it at the line, will you see somebody in your house?
Okay, I want to give some other what he said. I've been working during 5 years in Ghana. We saw anything there. People criticizing even the president, joking the president. And this country is not possible. So speaking about freedom of speech is very limited. And people live in fear because they don't want to be killed or to be embarrassed by anything. So we cannot express really what's within. So we just accept everything.
You say that in media is.
No, this is true.
I would say, even like I said before, like the United States has many things that it needs to work on. But two things, you can say anything in the US, maybe too much. You can criticize the president, you can post pictures that are insulting, and it's your right. And the media has the right to express themselves as well in media. And of course, it does create problems like we've seen with misinformation. But I have to say that in US, that in my opinion, that's one of the hallmarks of our country, which comes with the First Amendment, freedom of expression, freedom of the press, freedom to assemble whenever, wherever you want.
you think that there is financial security for most?
Yes, yes, I want to get 1 minute, please. To promote democracy, we have to think about a good system, economic system, who permit all people to have a sort of such as social situation. We can get good food, good school, and good health. It was just a start. If we have this condition, we can think about real democracy. Because if you are hungry and somebody gives you money to decide for him, it's not a democracy. You don't want to, you can do what you want, but yes, you do what they set you to do, they tell you to do. Because if you don't do it, will not get money. If you don't do it, you can't get hospital in your country. You can get the roads in your country. So when the political tell such as things, you can't promote democracy. So
Before
I just want to add something. When you see, for example, the members of our government, the new one, just look at the name. Look at the name. So you can't talk about democracy because in our mentalities, if you are not from the same region,
Yeah.
you are not accepted. Even if you are intelligent, you are not needed. So we have to change our mentality. The notion of nation, we need it. From north to south, east to east, you are Ivorian. Yeah, you have to be united. So if I want a doctor, even if he's from the south, I am from the north. If he's competent, I have to take it.
So it sounds like freedom of expression, freedom of the press, equal economic opportunity, and just equality and equity. No matter who you are.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
I agree with that. That's what I want to say. Because in our continent, especially in Cote d'Ivoire, we have a problem of political parties. It depends. When you are PDC, when you are PDC, for you, when you are PDC and the president is PDC, for you, you have democracy. When you are the president is Jula, for you, we are democracy. When you are a PPRC, for you, PPRC is true. That's a problem in Africa, in our continent. That's why I say that I agree with my sister, my change away mentality. Big United States, French, Russia, Turkey, the big nation must help us to be really democracy. They must stop to impose, to choose a different president. They must arrest, stop to to
Right.
politics, democracy in Africa is difficult. Difficult. Is it very really interested democracy practice in our continent? When you give me money, you give me a fuel, you give me a diamond. When you can give me everything which is good for my country, I support you. Support you. You want to represent in Ghana? Okay, give me your God. I'll give you your uniform. I'm going to support you. Is that the problem? This is my channel. This is my opinion.
I would like to add something. In my mind, there is a difference between democracy and human rights. I think all of us have a confusion. The human right is the other system of democracy. Okay? The democracy is the power, is the people power, the power of the people. In our society, in Côte d'Ivoire, you notice that there is difference in our mind, in North, in South, in West, and